Often I say that working with such talented group, like every conservatory in the world, I'm sure is the same. The challenges are not can they play or not, but rather how can we make them detach from their strong personalities playing Sibelius violin concerto to play in a collaborative way, to really let go, to really trust the person next to them in front or in the back, wherever, and join the communion, really join the party of making sound.
So great to meet you here on Zoom.
You too. Thank you. Thank you for the time for the interview, and happy to meet you, talk to you.
Yeah, it's wonderful to see everything that you've done. And are you quite busy now over the summer?
Actually, yes. Usually the summers I'd like to take on one or two projects, but this summer in particular, I guess, post pandemic, things started picking up more and more year after year. So this summer, I've been quite busy traveling and doing a few projects, a recording project, release of a recording project, two operas, uh, working on a ballet, and so a number of things. I'm quite happy, busy but very happy.
Oh, yeah, of course. But I saw this CD that you released. It's a flute concerto. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so we recorded two flute concertos, one by Karl Reinecke and one by Krzysztof Penderecki with the Janacek Philharmonic Orchestra in the Czech Republic last year. But of course, as you know, the whole process of post-production, promotion,
Oh, yeah.
design, everything takes a while. So finally, it was released this past June by the label Hensler Classic, German label. And the flutist, a dear friend of mine, Krzysztof Kacka, Polish flutist, and I have known each other for a while. We had discussed this recording, pardon me, before the pandemic, but we couldn't materialize it, of course. And then finally, we set a date, had talked to the orchestra, the repertoire. We had a number of sessions like this on Zoom, talking tempi, talking, uh, artistic curation. And so it feels great to finally, have it done. And
Amazing.
so
Mm.
very proud of it. It's a beautiful pairing of flute concertos. The Reinecke is very traditional, romantic in itself. Not that by his time there wasn't anything newer being written. He just purposely wanted to stay in a more traditional language. And Penderecki, well, of course, a lot more edgier, more modern in many ways. And as a result, very difficult for everyone, for the soloist and for the orchestra, not just technically, but also um, lyrically, expressively very difficult. There's a lot of depth in Penderecki's works. Um, very, very intense. I like to use that word.
But what amazing collaboration that you could have done that because you are in America and they are in Europe. So was that a bit difficult then also?
It was difficult to get a hold of things at
Mm.
first, how, get on the rhythm of our dynamic because of, time difference and whatnot. But once we aligned our criteria into what the end goal was, things
Mm.
became much easier. So then we met, of course, in person a couple of times until we began rehearsals in July last year.
But you are a flutist yourself. You started out playing the flute.
That's correct. So I'm a flute player myself, and so this repertoire, of course, I known of it, and played the Reinecke, not the Penderecki. I've known that concerto, but for me it was, of course, just a pleasure to learn it and to have those two concertos under my belt that I could be ready to conduct. I have a lot of friends who are flute players that have told me, when I play it, please can you conduct it? And so
Really? Mm.
happy to do it. Yeah.
Mm.
And then Shistov Katska, sorry, not Penderecki, Shistov Katska, the flutist in the city, is coming to New York to perform it with the Brooklyn Symphony this season. And so I was happy to invite him. He accepted, and he will be here performing the Reinecke.
Do you as a conductor, now you know what it's like to be a flutist, do you tend to then also understand the flutist side of the orchestra?
Yeah, in fact, I think one thing balances the other, and both sides of the spectrum have things to teach the other side. As an orchestral musician and as a conductor, there are elements that are very important to be aware of each other. For example, the role of the flute usually, because in the evolution of the instrument, the repertoire tended to be a bit more discreet, more subdued. And then as the evolution of the instrument became more prominent, technically advanced, volume from wood to silver or to a different metal, the volume became exponentially bigger and the capacities. So flutists would bring that virtuosity from centuries ago, but now with an instrument that sounded louder and could play faster, it became a little too loud for the orchestra. So that's the flutist problem to resolve that. Now they're playing too loud. They had been coming from traditions of have to overplay on a wooden flute, overblow, overplay. But when you have a better instrument, now you're playing too loud. And so it's the conductor's responsibility to balance and fine tune those things. That's just a simple example. But of course, the physicality of playing an instrument in the orchestra versus the intangible gestural part of the conductor, that you're not necessarily playing an instrument. You're literally not playing an instrument as a conductor. So I find it very interesting, fascinating to see what things can I learn as a flute player to make me a better conductor, and the other way around, as a conductor to make me a better flute player.
But you're talking about the sound now, and I spoke to Christian Spataro. He's a conductor, and he said that a conductor is almost like a sound engineer. You have to control the sound of everything.
I love that, sound engineer, indeed. Of course, that's one of the many tasks as a conductor that you should have. Technically speaking, a good conductor, former conductor of the National Symphony in the U.S., Leonard Slatkin, once said in a masterclass that the jobs of the conductor are very simple. He said, there are 6 things that a conductor does and nothing else. Of course, he was joking, but there's a little bit of that. Those things, 6 things are, should things be faster or slower, louder or softer, shorter or longer? So basically, if you can show the orchestra, that's it. Something needs to be faster or slower, louder or softer, shorter or longer. You're good to go. Of course, there's a lot of that and several things of artistic interpretation. But in a nutshell, that is true. Being an engineer of sound, also you have a responsibility to make those decisions and be informed whether a particular instrument can do it or not, or what's possible from that instrument that adds to the whole equation of the orchestra.
But what made you change from being a flutist and or study conducting? What was the shift for you?
Well, I had always had a curiosity for the process of music making, how the mechanics, if you will. Now that we're talking in scientific terms, engineering and mechanics,
Yeah.
that music get become music, independent parts that come together and that have to be very focused, conscious effort to be together to create a one product in real time simultaneously. So that process, and that becomes very evident, obvious in chamber music, for example. When you're making chamber music, it's obvious that there's a part that's the inner line, inner thread, let's say Alberti arpeggios, things like this. There's a bass, there's a melody, there may be a counter melody, counterpoint. So all these elements eventually help me discover this, answer these questions of how does music get made. But then, from a psychological standpoint, you could say I always had that urge to dictate with even with like wind quintet I played for many years. I always had an opinion. I think we should play this way from a kid. I'm talking like from being a teenager. And then my personality went in that direction, the curiosity, of course, my passion for music. I became a flute player by profession, and then eventually became more and more interested in conducting, started doing workshops and competitions, formal studies. And so as I continued to develop as a flute player, my interest in conducting continued to grow until there's not a specific day that I woke up and say, I'm now just going to be a conductor. But it was a gradual process. And then opportunities started to come up as a conductor more. My time was more focused on conducting duties. And here we are.
Amazing. But you also you have to be a lot of things as a conductor, because you have to be a leader, but you have to also be the interpreter.
That's right. You have to be a leader, and by leadership, not just we need to eradicate the idea of the leader as a dictator. That's unfortunately very traditionally associated with a conductor. That figure of that conductor is no longer relevant, is not practical, not correct, if you will, in today's world, today's modern world. So the leader of today needs to be a more comprehensive, a more empathic leader, someone that's really involved with the orchestra, with the persons, not just the instrument. I recall an instance where when you address musicians by their name, their response is different as if you say flute one, trumpet two, clarinet two. It just as a small example, but how the psychology of the conductor as a leader has changed, more approachable, more direct. So those are some things that are evolving. And as an interpreter, of course, you first need to be a fully realized professional musician. You can't be, and this is my opinion, of course, you can't be a choreographer if you have never danced before. Or it's difficult. Perhaps in music it doesn't translate that example. I don't know, or because you could be a film director and never have acted. So there goes my thesis. But with music, I think it's important to understand the mechanics and the engineering of music before you can direct it, before you can plan to do something about it. I've had education also, and I'm also have a bachelor's in communications and marketing in Mexico. And so parallel to studying in the conservatory, I was studying in marketing communication school. And at the time, I didn't understand what I was going to do with it, but it helped me. It helped me acquire other tools that have served me as a conductor, as the leader that has to be aware of other things that are non-musical, from running relations with a board of directors, ticket sales, promotion, addressing the audience, addressing the media, planning. All these other things are more management than musical.
This I've also heard, and it's really something that I didn't realize, is that you are a type, you're sort of a manager. You know, you have to organize and you have to get the people together, collaborate, and you have so many things that you have to do, and the business side of things you also have to understand.
That's correct. So ideally, a conductor is someone that understands music as an entertainment form, as horrible as that may sound to true artists, but the conductor does need to have that understanding, not necessarily being at the helm or the leader of the business part, because that's why organizations have an executive director. But the conductor definitely needs to have a say and a strong vision paired with that aspect. Meaning, the conductor is the head of the artistic part, and marrying the business part of it is the goal. But you can't dictate policy, or you can't dictate the business direction without having an argument as to why or how is going to be done. One particular example recently is the programming that has changed in the past 5-10 years to become a lot more expanded, more diverse, more inclusive. And there are reasons, there are social political reasons as to why we need to do that, and we're responsible for doing it as leaders of the arts. We need to be attuned with what's happening in the world and act on it.
But you've also won a lot of awards and you've done a lot of competitions. How important is that for a conductor to make a name? Is it to build up a name or a reputation that you do that?
Yeah, so I think it is important, not essential. Of course, you are every person, every artist becomes an artist by living, by going through the experience of life, right? Emotions, positive, traumatic events, all these things that makes us persons, and how can we channel these life events through our art. That said, because of the business part of the modern world, that there is competition, that there's connectivity, that there's globalization, if you want, we need to work to put our name out there. We need to work to advance. So competitions, while they have pros and cons, competitions are a way to put your name out there and to help you advance. However, the goal should not be that. I think, in my opinion, the goal should be self-improvement. At least with me, it has worked that when I have a competition, it's imperative that I create a plan for 3, 4, 6 months in advance as to little milestones. What am I going to be doing this week? This month, I'm expected to accomplish this other month. And that scale in itself is very valuable, to be very methodical about preparation, discipline, work hard. And I have told myself when I'm in preparing for a competition, um, if I don't win anything, I've already won. That I learned these pieces very well. I've already won. That I become more disciplined, more organized. Have met people, have had this experience. So every competition, every performing experience is an opportunity for grow and for learning. Um, if they can provide feedback as to what you did right and what you didn't, that's also very good. Um, but I go back to your question. Competitions are important, but not essential.
Mm. It's interesting that you say that about the learning, because I spoke to a young soprano and she said that she feels like this about auditions. You know, people complain about auditions and you have to do all the auditions. And she said that every audition she goes to, she sees as a learning curve, you know, as a this I've learned a piece and I've had this experience and so on. So it's so positive that you also see that in competitions.
It is, you have to take it that way. Of course, that's not to say that the mentality of winning also is there, and
Yeah.
you should have it. Um, uh, but in the list of benefits from doing a competition, um, the learning curve is often overlooked. People don't see it as an opportunity that you are now better. You learned this repertoire. You have built endurance. So those are really long-standing benefits beyond monetary prize or a performance opportunity. The becoming a better musician, a better athlete, if you will, and more like mentally uh, prepared, that's really the long-term benefit. um, and that also uh, becoming a conductor, going back to our previous point, competitions are an important part of it, um, especially because there's no one clear path to becoming a conductor like there is for a violinist or a pianist, flutist, that you go to conservatory, take auditions. It doesn't happen like that for conductors, unfortunately. First of all, in the US, for example, um, there are there are not undergraduate studies for conducting. It don't exist.
Really?
Usually, it's just graduate studies. So first, you're expected to be an orchestral musician before you um, go for conducting. So workshops, master classes are usually the best way to go. Attend a lot of master classes, um, summer institutes as well, competitions, and because as I said, you're expected to first be not just an orchestral musician, but a musician. You could play guitar and still be a conductor, recorder. So that's why it's important to keep those things on track, competitions. And also, like another teacher has said, no one person has uh, the same path as conducting as another person. Like in orchestral musician, there's a clear path. With conducting, there are persons that have great opportunities from the get-go and maybe don't have the preparation yet, or people that have all the preparation and not great opportunities, and everybody in between. So it really varies. When you look at the history of some of the most successful conductors, it varies widely. Some won a competition, some were in the right place at the right time. So it varies a lot, and every person's story is different. And usually, that's the best advice I can give conducting colleagues. That don't desist, be patient. Every person has their own story, and unfortunately, because it's such a relatively newer profession than being a pianist or a violinist, there is no clear path. Every
Oh, yeah.
person's path is different in conducting.
But you mentioned ballet and you're involved in I read you're involved in a summer opera program. So, but these are all different ways of conducting. So you
Yeah,
conduct differently with opera and ballet and then orchestra.
that's right. So with opera, of course, the star or the leading part is the diva, the opera star, of course. And I say in a respectful and logical way because we depend on the voice. The voice has certain limitations. A singer would, of course, want to display or show off their higher notes, the high C, things like this. So, we have performance practice and traditions that have perpetuated over the centuries. And so that said, an orchestral musician that's not trained in opera will find it very difficult to follow in an orchestra pit, to follow what's happening. That's where the conductor needs to come in. That's where the conductor is a mediator between what's happening with the singer and or the staging of that particular production. If the stage director is changing everything radically, whatever it is, the setting, and translating into gesture, into effectiveness with the people in the orchestra, in the pit. So that's one style approach. And then with ballet, rhythm and consistency, rhythm, and I would say, flexibility, of course, same with opera, but consistency is very important. Because of the physicality of what the dancers are doing, they need to do 25 fouettes and you can't speed them up because then, you're just not going to create a positive environment for the dancer. But, curious is that usually dancers would tell you that the tempo was fast or slow, and then you do exactly the same thing, and then they say that's perfect. So I don't know if it's a placebo thing, but some dancers have told me that usually it's because the heartbeat, they are tired, and when they're relaxed, of course, their sensation is different of tempo than when they're moving, and I can understand that, of course. So perception of tempo, is very important for a conductor that works with dancers. And of course, with a symphony orchestra, no dance, no music, the star is the orchestra. And as such, we need to be very consciously focused and together in creating the best interpretation.
So do you have a preference? Is there one that you enjoy more, conducting more?
Well, Petra, I don't know if I should say that publicly.
Oh.
I like all of these. Perhaps symphonic repertoire. Not that I prefer it, but because the orchestra is the star, I like that there are more stars than one star, one singer or one dancer.
Oh, okay. But now
That's my safe answer.
Oh, okay. But tell me about, so you are also artistic director of the Brooklyn Symphony Orchestra.
Yeah, so Brooklyn Symphony Orchestra here in New York is turning 50 years this season. And it began as a very relaxed group of amateur musicians, some freelancers in the New York City area that wanted to get together. It began as the Brooklyn High Society of Musicians. Eventually, of course, it became the Brooklyn Symphony. And now they're turning 50. And while it is still a community group, it has professional musicians some of the recent graduate students from the local conservatories, Manhattan School, Juilliard School of Music, Mannes, etc., join and usually come for 1, 2, 3 years before they go on to their careers. But it's a very interesting group, and in Brooklyn is very well known. Brooklyn is a borough of New York City that has grown a lot in the past years. There's a lot of really great things creatively happening, good things in the creative and arts fields. So I'm very happy to be part of it. I became their assistant conductor initially, and for 2 years, and then after that, associate conductor, and now I am the interim artistic director. And of course, I take a lot of pride in what the orchestra has done and my contribution uh, over these past few years. And we're looking forward to this season celebrating 50 years. We are taking them to Mexico for the second time, my home country. We're going on a tour, and then we're doing film concerts, of course, standard repertoire. We're doing the Nutcracker, Beethoven 7, Prokofiev Romeo and Juliet. We have soloists, international soloists, pianists, Krzysztof Kacka, the soloist in the CD, playing the Reinecke. So very exciting season ahead, and I'm very proud of the group. A lot of involvement from the musicians. It's self-run. The musicians run the organization. We have a board of directors, but ultimately the decision is self-run.
But this is something in America that I've learned over the time that I've done the interviews, that you have these orchestras that are they are not all professional musicians. Some of them, they have another job.
Actually, the majority of them have other jobs, whether it's lawyers, engineers, architects. A lot of them that are not full-time musicians are music educators. So they teach in public school, private school. They're involved in music, but not in a performance career. So, or art administrators, things like this. But they are really treated, and they, of course, behave as in the same habits of a professional musician. We have auditions, and we have, of course, placements of principal, assistant principal, and so on. So it is competitive. Nonetheless, it's a group that we have fostered a sense of belonging. I like to call that as a big family, because everybody is there because they want to be there, and because they want to really have that platform to play great music, to be on an itinerary and a schedule rather of a plan that we have. This next concert, it needs to happen, as I said before, a methodical plan, and so we work. And for those that sometimes they just want to casually come and play, and this is not the group. I like to be very upfront, very direct. This is not necessarily the group for casual playing, sight read music. That's not the case.
But amazing that they are so committed, and that you, and of course the work that you do there. And then you're also involved in the is it Manhattan School of Music?
Yes. So the Manhattan School of Music has several orchestras, where there's a pre-college division, the college division, graduate division, and in the pre-college division there are 4 orchestras. And so I'm in charge of one of these 4 orchestras since 2018. I'm beginning my 5th season, and so it's been great to work with very talented music students that are very focused, and that have the support of their families. For the most part, these students come with a mindset already of wanting to become musicians. Being a conservatory, we can have students that are as young as 11, 12 years old and
Really?
above, all ages. If they can play, they are admitted. And so, of course, later on, there are other requirements that they need to have a high school diploma, things like this, in order to advance to other levels. But I have enjoyed working with them. I enjoy working with the Manhattan School of Music. Is a great organization, and often I say that working with such talented group, like every conservatory in the world, I'm sure is the same. The challenges are not can they play or not, but rather how can we make them detach from their strong personalities playing Sibelius violin concerto to play in a collaborative way, to really let go, to really trust the person next to them in front or in the back, wherever, and join the communion, really join the party of making sound. It sounds easy, but it's really difficult. No musician ever wants to make a mistake on purpose or wants to put themselves at risk of not doing something right. It sounds logical, but it's like the analogy of, let's say you're walking and you don't throw yourself on the floor on purpose unless you trip, right,
Yeah.
and fall. So same thing with music making or similar, in that no person wants to not follow the balance, not follow what's right. And so that's a part that is difficult, to make all these different personalities really trust and let go of balance and really play. So it's a very interesting setting, different than other youth orchestras that I have worked with. So I really like enjoying with my students at Manhattan School, and it has given me a lot of happiness and positive experiences, concerts, and I look forward to more time there if the time allows and if they want me there.
Oh, but they must be under extreme competition and amongst each other, because I mean, this is New York. The competition to get into orchestras like that must be huge.
It is very competitive, but also we have 4 orchestras, so we try to give a place for everybody. But they need to have a certain level of playing. Usually, the students that come to Manhattan School of Music have already played in many other orchestras, from the elementary school to State Youth Orchestra of New Jersey or Connecticut or New York, like the area. And so they come now thinking of pursuing music as a career, to really go in that direction. So we have some students, a good amount of students, I would even dare say a third of our students, if not more, are students that their entire families move from a different country to come live in New York so that their child can pursue music studies. People from Europe, from Asia, from Korea, and other cities in the U.S., South America, and so I remember a couple of students from one from the Netherlands, a pair of sisters from the Netherlands, both very good. To give an example, in violin playing and also in figure skating, almost at a competitive level. And so, when they get to Manhattan School of Music, I think the requirement, and it's so demanding that they in a way need to choose one or another, and we are there to help. As educators, we have the responsibility to help each person choose guide them, but we cannot dictate, right? So I remember one of them really went into figure skating, and the other really went into violin. Maybe they will change tomorrow. I don't know, but I give that example as to the type of situations that we encounter. But our responsibility is to guide and to say a career in music. You will have to do this and this and that. It could work. It could not. It has worked for others. But the reality is it is a difficult career. And so from a young age, while they come with this mindset, it's important they come with their families and they support them in advancing and growing as musicians.
Yeah, because it's also that dedication, that and the sacrifices to leave your country or to leave your family and go. So and from a young age, like you say, from a young age already, you have to be committed to what you want to do. It's not something that you can just pick up, when you're 18 or so, decide you want to be a violinist. You have to have that whole time where you spent and as a young child, dedicated to your instrument.
I agree. It's very important to have the support, a system of support in a home. Of course, that's not to say that if you don't have it, you can't be a musician. Of course, you can. Passion in the end and vocation will happen regardless. But I usually see very inspiring stories of families that move their entire life to a different country, a different state, and for success stories. Really, some of these students go on to pursue music and then have important careers. So of course, that's very, I feel I take pride in them, even though I've only been there for a little over 5 years, well, starting the next year. I love my students and I take pride of their accomplishments. Often they contact me on social media and say, "How are you? I remember you said this and that and whatnot." And so, the benefits of an educator.
Well, you talk about social media now. You've got a very interesting Instagram page.
Yeah. So I think that's where the communications and marketing background has manifested. In that I think that the modern musician, the modern artist, needs to pay attention, of course, to digital channels, digital media, social media, and it's an important tool. Putting aside the fun aspect of it, that could also be dangerous because then you could be distracted. But it is an important tool that we need to consider, that is being considered now by all arts organizations. Major arts organizations are really now putting efforts to it. And so in my page, I like to show the aspects behind the scenes, you could say. Of course, show some things are happening in my life, in my music life, sometimes even in my personal life, family, things like this. But I think people are curious to know, what happens. How do you prepare for a piece? For example, I have a score of Don Giovanni. And so I was recording earlier some stories of the parts that how I divided and whatnot. And then comparing it to different editions. There's the bandwriter, this is the Peters. So, all this behind the scenes, I think is important content to be there. And that it can be successful. People are curious and then they consume your product, and as a result, support music and come to your performances.
Yeah, I think you do it in a wonderful way because you do show the behind the scenes, but and it's so different things that you show, but it's really connecting. I think it's you really do it in a very lovely way.
Thank you. I think it's important to, because we have a target audience, the younger ones especially, that
Yeah,
their first encounter, and especially post-pandemic, is through digital world before they go onto a physical a theater to see a performance. So we have that responsibility to show them and then invite them. The risk there is that if everything becomes digital, then what's going to happen there. But
yeah.
I think it's fun to keep a balance, and as you said, show the behind the scenes, the details, and take advantage of that tool of social media.
Well, I saw also on your Instagram that you were at the Grammy Awards, and I read that you are involved in the is it the Afro Latin Jazz Band? Is it a band or an orchestra?
It's an Afro Latin Jazz. Well, the organization is called the Afro Latin Jazz Alliance,
Yeah,
and the alliance has different groups under their umbrella. One is the Afro Latin Jazz Orchestra, the Afro Latin Jazz Ensemble, the Fat Cats Youth Orchestra, which is a jazz youth orchestra. Well, three youth orchestras by level. And so with this organization, what I do is creative partnerships, meaning with my background in classical, I try to bridge the Latin world, Latin arts, Latin jazz world with classical, and where do they intersect? What projects can be done? And Arturo Oferio, who is the artistic director of the Afro Latin Jazz Alliance, has said many times that he doesn't like to define his music or his orchestra, the Afro Latin Jazz Orchestra, in a particular genre, but rather that the beginning point is Afro-Cuban, Afro-Latin jazz, but then expand onto other genres, and so much so that he has written symphonic pieces that I have conducted, premiered, and now he's working on an opera that I'm going to conduct. And so I think very interesting things that happen. And here in New York, like in Europe, that you are in a big city where you see a dancer, an architect, a fashion designer. And so all this intercollaboration, interdisciplinary collaboration, enriches the experience. So this organization does that. And the Grammy that you saw is a project in which I participated. The Afro Latin Jazz Alliance created an album called Fandango at the Wall. And so this was a massive project began a few years ago, Fandango at the Wall, where we did produce a concert on the border between Mexico and the US, in California, in San Diego on the US side, and Tijuana on the Mexico side. And that concert was very successful. A fandango, it's a celebration, it's a party, sound, like a jam session where any musician can join. So this was, of course, a curated performance, a concert. And so from that project came a documentary on HBO, then came 2 different albums, a book, and a touring version of it that went to many places, Middle East, Europe, South America, etc. And so the last album is the one that got the Grammy. And of course, we went to LA for the celebration this past February. It was incredible. It was the first time I went to a Grammy ceremony, and it only reaffirmed my my ideas that that we live in a bubble sometimes in classical music. it has pros and cons. The pros is that we are guardians of the canon, of classical music. But the con is that we missed on many things that are happening outside our bubble, like things that are happening in the music business, in other genres, in pop, in rock, whether you like it or not, right? These things are happening, the business part of it. But there is a middle point where classical and pop meet that it's very interesting. I think it's often neglected. Usually people in the classical world see pop music as a little bit less, and in pop or more popular genres, they don't think the same as classical. Actually, they pay their respects. In my experience, every time a more popular rock artist learns that they're working with a classical musician, they are very positive and very respectful and enthusiastic. And so I think as classical musicians, we have responsibilities to be friendly, to be collaborative. And being at the Grammys for me was an eye-opening experience in that sense.
Amazing. And also, crossing genres and being interested in the different genres must be also something that it's great for musicians.
It is because it enriches your experience. Of course, you become more acquainted with other disciplines and see what things you learn from a different genre that you can apply to your genre. In particular, with jazz world, I've learned of freedom, improvisational, and not being afraid to experiment. That usually in classical, because we have very strict set of rules of how to play, the mindset. It's very nourishing to bring that freedom into classical world.
Yeah, no, I can imagine that. But now, Felipe, you're doing such amazing work. I mean, if I read about all the things you do, I don't know where you have time to do everything, but you are so committed and you do so many things. But what is the dream for you?
Great question. Well, I guess the dream is to become the best version of myself, as cheesy as that sounds. But really, I think I um, I want to be the best I can be in directing when I'm directing, conducting, or performing if I'm playing flute. Although my focus right now is solely on conducting, so that's where I'm putting most of my efforts. If you ask me, do I enjoy more ballet, opera, symphonic, as you did? I think it's symphonic, but I love opera. I really like opera, and so we'll see where I'm. I'm letting things happen organically, naturally, where I gravitate. At times, if I'm disappointed because a particular project didn't work, maybe I'm sad in that moment, but maybe that's a sign of the universe telling me that's not where I need to go. And, at times we don't see these things only until later. But yeah, I think my goal is to continue performing, continue growing, and trying to learn from these different areas of arts administration, education, Manhattan School, social media, communications, these tools to make me a better artistic leader, a better music director.
Well, I think it's a wonderful dream to have or wish to have, and yeah, I mean, you've done, like I say, you've done so much already, and a very impressive work. That's really, especially with the youth orchestras and the way you talk about that. Because I think they are also the musicians of the future, and it's so important the way I think they are treated and the way the example they are being given. So congratulations for all the work that you're doing there.
Thank you, Petra. Thank you so much. At one time I was a student in a youth orchestra. I was inspired by my professors, by my teachers, and I can only hope I can also serve as inspiration to my students. And I think in giving, there is receiving. So when you give,
Exactly.
you also receive, you grow, and that's also another goal to grow as I give.
Wonderful. But Felipe, do you ever come to Vienna?
I have only been for vacation, so I hope sometime I can be there for another vacation or for performing.
Yeah, but you have to let me know when you're here.
I will, and I would love to meet in person, maybe have lunch or coffee, dinner.
That would be great. That would be wonderful. So
Or
let's
if you come to New York, please let me know.
Yeah, I've never been to America. I've never been to New York, but I'll definitely let you know when I come.
Oh, you have to come to New York. Yes, it's overwhelming, but it's exciting.
Oh, okay. Well, on your Instagram, it looks very exciting. So I'll definitely have to come.
It is exciting. I have great memories from Vienna when I was there first time. I felt I was in a dream. So
Really? Well, let's put the wish out there that you come to Vienna and you come and do a concert here.
I would love that, and you will certainly be there, and I'll give you tickets for first row.
Oh, that would be great. So now we have to put that wish out there. Let's do it.
Thank you so much, Petra. I'm talking to you.
Okay,
Thank you, Petra.
Have a lovely afternoon.
Bye. Thank you. Good night.